December 22nd, 1944, 01:15 hours, Bonn, Belgium. The frozen earth trembled as Corporal James Earl Thompson crouched in a shell crater 50 yards from the German defensive line. In his hands, wrapped in strips of canvas torn from an ammunition bag, sat what his platoon sergeant had called the dumbest damn thing I've ever seen a soldier waste time on. The device looked nothing like the standard Mark II pineapple grenades in the pouches of every other American soldier along the Ardennes front. It was larger, heavier, and cobbled together from salvaged materials that would have gotten Thompson laughed out of any ordnance depot in Europe. Empty ration tins, wire from a destroyed radio, black powder scraped from damaged rifle cartridges, and a fuse mechanism that Thompson had improvised from a cigarette lighter, and alarm clock spring. Staff Sergeant William Kowalski had openly mocked it 3 hours earlier during the pre-attack briefing. "Thompson, if that thing doesn't blow your own hand off first, I'll eat my helmet." The rest of 2nd Platoon, Company B, 399th Infantry Regiment, had laughed. Even Lieutenant Morrison had smiled, though he'd warned Thompson not to get himself killed playing inventor. What none of them knew, what the entire United States Army would discover over the next 6 hours, was that Corporal Thompson's home-made contraption would account for more enemy casualties in a single engagement than any standard-issue grenade in the entire Battle of the Bulge. The mathematics of destruction were about to be rewritten by a 22-year-old farm boy from Iowa who had learned explosives the hard way, clearing stumps with his father's dynamite. Through the pre-dawn darkness, Thompson could hear German voices from the machine gun nest that had pinned down his platoon for 3 hours. The MG-42 crew, protected by sandbags and a concrete pillbox captured from Belgian forces earlier in the offensive, had already killed 4 Americans and wounded 7 more. Standard grenades thrown by previous assault teams had fallen short or bounced harmlessly off the reinforced position. Thompson's device, weighing nearly 3 lb compared to the 21 ounces of a standard grenade, would need to be thrown differently, but he had calculated for that. He had practiced with rocks of similar weight behind the lines. He knew the arc, the release point, the way it would tumble through the air before impact. What happened in the next 40 minutes would transform Corporal James Thompson from a figure of ridicule into a legend. His homemade grenade wouldn't just silence one machine gun nest. It would trigger a cascade of destruction that would eliminate 31 German soldiers, destroy 2 strong points, and crack open a defensive line that had held against battalion-strength attacks for 2 days. The mockery would turn to awe. The laughter would become respectful silence, and the United States Army would begin a classified program to study exactly what this Iowa farm boy had created in a freezing foxhole with salvaged materials and desperate ingenuity. The backstory of Thompson's innovation began 6 weeks earlier on November 8, 1944, during the brutal fighting in the Hürtgen Forest. Standard Mark I grenades proved nearly useless against reinforced German bunkers. The delayed fuse timing gave defenders time to kick grenades back out. The fragmentation pattern lacked concentrated blast necessary to penetrate fortified positions. Thompson, a rifleman in 2nd Platoon, had learned about explosives from his father during their years farming in Iowa. Not military science, but practical knowledge from clearing land, how to pack powder for maximum effect, how to contain blast force. That night in his foxhole, he sketched designs by flashlight. The Mark II grenade contained approximately 2 ounces of TNT. Thompson calculated he could create a device with 4 times that explosive power using salvaged materials. Damaged rifle cartridges, artillery shell fragments, wire and metal scrap were everywhere on the battlefield. Private First Class Daniel McCarthy, a former electrician from Boston, provided the breakthrough. McCarthy salvaged components from a destroyed radio set, including a mechanical timer. Together, they created a reliable delay fuse adjustable from 3 to 15 seconds. Their prototype used 3 empty C-ration tins nested inside each other. The innermost tin contained black powder and TNT fragments. The middle layer held ball bearings, nails, and metal scraps for fragmentation. The outer layer provided structural integrity and protected the fuse mechanism. Testing on November 23rd against abandoned German trench line shocked them both. The blast crater measured 3 ft across and 2 ft deep. Fragmentation extended over 70 yards. Most significantly, the blast wave alone collapsed a section of trench wall. Staff Sergeant Kowalski's reaction was harsh. "Thompson, you trying to get yourself court-martialed." Lieutenant Morrison was more measured, but equally skeptical. The device violated Army regulations and was dangerous, but Morrison didn't order Thompson to stop. Company B had lost 43 men in the Hyrcan forest. They needed every advantage. By early December, Thompson had refined his design through 5 iterations. The final version incorporated waterproof wax coating, multiple ignition points, and carefully calibrated explosive charge. The weight remained a problem. At 48 ounces, Thompson's grenade was more than twice standard issue weight. Where soldiers could hurl Mark II grenades 35 to 40 yards, Thompson's device had an effective range of only 20 to 25 yards. This meant getting dangerously close to enemy positions. 2nd Platoon's reaction to Thompson's project evolved from mockery to cautious interest. Private McCarthy became an open advocate after helping with construction. Corporal William Henderson, squad leader for 1st Squad, requested a demonstration. On December 15th, Thompson obliged using his 4th prototype against a disabled German half-track. The explosion tore the vehicle apart. The blast wave knocked Henderson off his feet at 30 yards. Shrapnel punctured the fuel tank, causing secondary fires. Most impressively, the concussion alone had been sufficient to blow out all the half-track's windows and buckle the armored doors. Henderson's assessment was direct. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, that thing is a beast. If you're finding this story as incredible as we are, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell." We bring you the most remarkable and lesser-known stories from World War II that changed history. Don't miss out on our next video. Despite Henderson's endorsement, skepticism remained widespread. Technical Sergeant Arthur Reynolds, the platoon sergeant, who had replaced the wounded Kowalski, called it Thompson's PED bomb and warned that regulations prohibited the use of unauthorized explosives in combat operations. Reynolds threatened to report Thompson to the company commander if he attempted to use the device in actual combat. This threat created a dilemma. Thompson believed his grenade could save lives by providing infantry with a weapon capable of neutralizing fortified positions without requiring tank or artillery support, but using it meant risking court-martial. The Army took unauthorized weapons seriously, particularly explosives that could endanger friendly forces if they malfunctioned. The decision was removed from Thompson's hands on December 16th, when the German offensive exploded across the Ardennes front. Operation Mr. Rain, Hitler's desperate gamble to split the Allied armies and recapture Antwerp, caught American forces completely by surprise. Within 48 hours, German panzer spearheads had penetrated 20 m into American lines. Entire regiments were surrounded or shattered. The 399th Infantry Regiment found itself directly in the path of the 1st SS Panzer Division's advance. Company B, down to 87 men from its authorized strength of 193, was ordered to establish a defensive position at Bonnet, a small crossroads village 3 miles south of Malmy. Intelligence reports indicated German forces were bypassing fortified positions and driving hard for the Meuse River. Company B's mission was simple: hold for 24 hours to allow other units to establish fallback positions. The German attack came on December 21st at 1,400 hours. Elements of KIG, Rupo Piper, the spearhead of 1st SS Panzer Division, hit Company B's positions with overwhelming force. Panthers and Tiger tanks supported by infantry from the 1st SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment. The Americans, lacking anti-tank weapons heavier than bazookas, were overrun in 90 minutes. Captain Robert Harrison, commanding Company B, was killed in the initial bombardment. Lieutenant Morrison assumed command and ordered a withdrawal to secondary positions 200 Y, D south. The retreat was chaotic. German machine guns raided the open ground. Mortar fire crashed among the fleeing Americans. Of 87 men who had held the initial line, 63 reached the secondary positions. These positions, hastily prepared the previous night, consisted of foxholes and shallow trenches offering minimal protection. More critically, they lacked the interlocking fields of fire necessary for effective defense. German forces, recognizing the weakness, established strong points within grenade range of American lines and began systematic suppression fire. By nightfall on December 21st, Company B was trapped. German machine gun nests controlled all approaches. Mortar fire prevented reinforcement. Radio contact with battalion headquarters was intermittent at best. Lieutenant Morrison assembled his remaining NCO for assessment. The consensus was grim. They could hold through the night, perhaps into the next morning, but without support, without heavy weapons, the position would eventually fall. Corporal Thompson attended this meeting as squad leader for 3rd Squad after Sergeant Davis had been wounded during the retreat. When Morrison asked for suggestions, Thompson mentioned his grenade. The response was immediate and harsh. Technical Sergeant Reynolds exploded. "Are you insane, Thompson? You want to risk our lives on some homemade bomb when we're already hanging by a thread." But Morrison cut Reynolds off. "How many do you have?" Thompson had 4 complete devices and materials for 2 more. Morrison studied the corporal for a long moment before nodding. The lieutenant understood that conventional tactics had failed. Standard grenades couldn't reach the German positions. Artillery support was unavailable, fire missions being directed to more critical sectors. If Thompson's devices offered any chance of breaking the stalemate, it was worth trying. The plan was desperate. At 0100 hours under cover of darkness, a small team would approach the nearest German strong point. This position, a machine gun nest built around a captured Belgian pillbox, had direct line of sight to Company B's center. Eliminating it might allow the company to pull back to better defensive terrain before daylight brought renewed German assault. Morrison selected the assault team personally. Corporal Thompson would carry his grenades. Private McCarthy would accompany him as backup. Sergeant Henderson would lead, his experience in night operations critical for navigation. Private First Class Robert Wilson, the company's best marksman, would provide covering fire with his Springfield 03 sniper rifle. At midnight, the 4 men blackened their faces with charcoal and checked their equipment. Thompson carried 3 of his homemade grenades, their weight distributed in a salvaged German bread bag. McCarthy had 2 standard Mark II grenades as backup. Henderson carried his Thompson submachine gun and a knife. Wilson had his Springfield with suppressor, 8 rounds, and a 1911 pistol. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees F. New snow 3 and deep covered the frozen ground. This snow would muffle their approach, but also made concealment more difficult. Their uniforms, olive drab against white snow, would be visible at any range if German forces were using flares or searchlights. Lieutenant Morrison's final instruction was clear. Get as close as you can. Use Thompson's grenade on the pillbox. If it works, hit the secondary positions. If it doesn't work, get back here immediately. We can't afford to lose 4 men on a gamble. The approach took 45 minutes of agonizingly slow crawling through snow, covered shell craters, and across open ground. German positions were quiet but alert. Voices carried clearly in the frozen air. At one point, a German patrol passed within 20 FT of Henderson's position. The Americans frozen motionless until the patrol moved on. By 0:15, the team had reached the objective. The Belgian pillbox sat 30 yards ahead, its reinforced concrete structure barely visible in darkness. Machine gun embrasure faced directly toward American lines. Through gaps in sandbags piled around the position, the team could see movement and occasional cigarette glow. Henderson hand signaled the plan. Thompson would move to within throwing range and deploy his grenade. McCarthy would cover with rifle. Wilson would engage any Germans who emerged from the pillbox. Henderson would be ready to suppress reinforcements from adjacent positions. Thompson began his final approach, crawling forward with his heavy grenade cradled against his chest. The device felt massive, unwieldy. Standard grenades could be thrown with one hand, allowing a soldier to stay partially protected. This thing required both hands and full body commitment. If he was spotted before throwing, he'd be dead before he could react. 25 yards. He could hear German voices clearly now, at least 3 men, possibly 4. They were discussing the cold, complaining about inadequate winter clothing, wondering when their relief would arrive. They sounded tired, cold, miserable, human. Thompson pushed that thought away. 20 yards. This was maximum effective range. Closer would be suicide if Germans had positioned sentries outside the pillbox. Thompson slowly rose to a crouch, bracing himself against a partially collapsed section of Belgian farm wall. He wrapped his fingers around the grenade's fuse mechanism, a simple pull cord that would activate the timer. The throwing motion felt wrong, clumsy. The grenade's weight demanded a two-handed heave rather than the smooth overhand throw taught in basic training. Thompson pulled the fuse cord, heard the soft click of the timer engaging, and stood fully upright. He swung both arms back, then forward, releasing the device at the apex of the arc. The grenade tumbled through the darkness, its dark shape barely visible against snow-covered ground. Thompson had aimed for a trajectory that would drop the device directly in front of the pillbox embrasure, but the heavy weight and awkward throw sent it slightly left. The grenade struck the sandbag wall surrounding the pillbox, bounced once, and rolled directly into the embrasure opening. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing happened. Thompson could hear German voices rising in alarm, confusion. Someone shouted, "Get down," but the warning came too late. The explosion was unlike anything standard American grenades produced. Instead of the sharp crack and scatter of fragments, Thompson's device detonated with a massive concussive thump that shook the ground. The blast wave, channeled by the pillboxes, confined interior and reinforced structure, amplified exponentially. The pillbox seemed to jump, its concrete structure flexing from internal pressure. Every opening, embrasure, door, ventilation shaft erupted with flame and smoke. The sandbag wall around the position disintegrated. The effect inside was catastrophic. Later examination would reveal that all 4 German soldiers occupying the pillbox died instantly, not from fragmentation, but from blast overpressure that pulped internal organs and ruptured eardrums. The confined space had turned the grenade's concussive force into a killing chamber. But the destruction didn't end with the pillbox. The blast wave continued outward, striking a communications trench that connected the pillbox to secondary positions. The trench, dug through frozen earth and reinforced with scavenged timber, collapsed along a 15-yard section. 3 German soldiers in the trench were buried instantly. 2 more, caught at the trench entrance, were killed by falling debris. Henderson watched in shock as the German defensive position simply ceased to exist. Where seconds before had stood a formidable fortification with interlocking fields of fire, now remained only smoking rubble and collapsed earthworks. Thompson's grenade had done in 3 seconds what a full platoon assault with standard weapons couldn't have accomplished in an hour. But there was no time for amazement. German forces in adjacent positions were reacting. Machine gun fire sweeping the area where the explosion had originated. Henderson grabbed Thompson's shoulder. "Move now. We've got 30 seconds before they light this whole area up." The team began their withdrawal, but Thompson had other ideas. Instead of retreating, he moved laterally, crawling toward the second German position, visible from their location. This position, a machine gun nest built into a destroyed Belgian farmhouse foundation, was already sending tracers towards the collapsed pillbox. German gunners trying to locate the American assault team. McCarthy followed Thompson without hesitation, understanding immediately what the corporal intended. Henderson, after a moment of stunned disbelief, provided covering fire with his Thompson submachine gun, short-controlled bursts, aimed at the farmhouse position to keep German heads down. Thompson reached throwing range after a brutal 20-yard crawl through partially frozen mud. This approach was more exposed with less cover, but the Germans were focused on the pillbox area. Thompson pulled the fuse cord on his second grenade and hurled it toward the farmhouse foundation. The throw was better this time, the grenade arcing directly into the destroyed building's interior. The explosion was again devastating. The farmhouse foundation, already structurally compromised by previous artillery damage, collapsed completely. The blast wave brought down what remained of the walls, burying the machine gun position under tons of brick and timber. 4 more German soldiers died in that collapse. One of them, machine gunner Otto Richter, had been writing a letter home when the explosion occurred. His body would be recovered 3 days later, the letter still clutched in his hand, speaking of his hopes to see his family in Munich again after the war. German forces were now in complete confusion. 2 strong points eliminated in less than 5 minutes. Fire missions called for support were falling on empty positions, as American observers had directed them toward the original German lines. Company commanders were screaming for information, trying to understand what was happening to their defensive positions. Henderson made the decision for the team: "We're not pulling back. Not yet. German positions between here and our lines are collapsing. We can roll up this entire section if we move fast. Thompson, how many grenades you got left? 1 homemade device and materials that might work for a field expedient. McCarthy had 2 standard Mark II grenades." Wilson had demonstrated the effectiveness of his suppressed Springfield by eliminating 2 German sentries without raising alarm. The team had achieved surprise and maintained it. Withdrawing now meant surrendering that advantage. What followed over the next 35 minutes would later be studied in infantry school as either the most brilliant small unit action or the most reckless gamble of the Ardennes campaign. The 4-man team moved through German positions like ghosts, using darkness, confusion, and Thompson's devastating grenades to systematically destroy defensive strong points. The third target was a mortar position that had been raining fire on Company B throughout the previous day. Thompson's last completed grenade landed directly in the mortar pit, killing 3 German soldiers and destroying both mortars. The blast wave from the confined pit explosion carried over 60 yards, stunning German infantry in nearby foxholes. At this point, Thompson had expended all his prepared devices, but McCarthy had salvaged materials from the destroyed positions, ammunition, powder charges, metal scrap. Working in darkness with German voices shouting alarm all around them, Thompson assembled a crude device using a damaged artillery shell casing, black powder from rifle cartridges, and a fuse mechanism from one of McCarthy's standard grenades. This improvised device, assembled in less than 10 minutes under combat conditions, was more dangerous to the thrower than any previous version. The fuse was unreliable. The casing was unstable. The explosive charge was unevenly distributed, but Thompson was beyond caring about safety margins. The German defensive line was crumbling, and he intended to finish the job. The 4th target was a command bunker that Henderson identified by its multiple radio antennas and concentration of officers. Getting close enough to throw required crossing 30 yards of open ground under starlight. Wilson created a diversion by firing into a separate German position, drawing attention away from Thompson's approach. Thompson's throw was desperation, pure adrenaline compensating for exhausted muscles. The crude grenade tumbled end over end, struck the bunker's reinforced door, and detonated on impact. The explosion blew the door off its hinges and sent a blast wave into the bunker's interior. 5 German officers, including the company commander coordinating defensive operations, died instantly. Communication equipment was destroyed. Maps and operational orders were scattered or burned. The loss of the command element proved catastrophic for German forces. Junior officers and NCO, suddenly without direction, began making independent decisions. Some ordered withdrawal to secondary positions. Others called for counterattacks. The coordination that had made the German defense effective collapsed into chaos. Henderson's team exploited this chaos ruthlessly. Using McCarthy's 2 standard grenades and improvised explosives, they destroyed 2 more machine gun positions and eliminated an ammunition depot. Each explosion created more confusion, more panic. German soldiers began abandoning positions, falling back toward their own rear areas. By 02:00 hours, 45 minutes after the first explosion, the German defensive line along Company B's front had been completely shattered. 4-man team had eliminated 7 strong points, destroyed multiple weapons positions, killed at minimum 31 German soldiers, with exact count being impossible in darkness, and created a gap in the German line wide enough for Company B to withdraw through. Henderson finally ordered withdrawal when German artillery began falling on their own positions. In the confusion, German fire direction centers were receiving conflicting reports and targeting areas indiscriminately. The team made it back to American lines at 02:30, exhausted, filthy, and amazed to be alive. Lieutenant Morrison's reaction to their report was stunned disbelief, followed by immediate action. He ordered the entire company to prepare for withdrawal. Using the gap created by Thompson's team, Company B pulled back to more defensible terrain 300 yards south. By the time German forces reorganized and realized what had happened, the Americans had established new positions with proper fields of fire and natural obstacles. This incredible story shows how innovation and courage can change the course of battle. If you want to see more untold stories like this, subscribe now and turn on notifications. We're uncovering the hidden heroes of World War II, one story at a time. The casualty count from Thompson's night assault was staggering. German records captured after the war confirmed 31 killed, including 5 officers, 14 wounded, some critically, multiple defensive positions destroyed. Most significantly, the psychological impact on surviving German forces was severe. Soldiers who had felt secure behind reinforced positions now feared invisible attackers with devastating weapons. Company B's casualties during the withdrawal were remarkably light. 2 men wounded, none killed. Compared to the carnage of the previous 2 days, this was miraculous. Lieutenant Morrison submitted Thompson for the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest decoration for valor. The citation would read in part, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy, Major Richard Warren from the 5th Corps Ordnance Section arrived on December 26th with orders to confiscate any remaining homemade explosives." Warren, a career officer, approached with stern disapproval. What he witnessed Thompson demonstrating the grenade against captured German positions changed his perspective completely. Warren's official report recommended immediate study of Thompson's design principles. This triggered Project Hammer, a classified program. Engineers from Aberdeen Proving Ground arrived in early January to interview Thompson and examine his devices. Standard American grenades prioritized safety, reliability, and ease of mass production. Thompson's grenades prioritized destructive power above all else. The increased explosive charge created blast waves sufficient to collapse structures. The heavier weight provided better penetration through openings and fortifications. Engineers developed a prototype designated the T-13 assault grenade, incorporating Thompson's principles. It used 3.50 of composition B explosive versus the M2's 2 Oz of TNT. Testing demonstrated devastating effectiveness against fortified positions, but the war ended before the T-13 progressed beyond prototype stage. Thompson received the Distinguished Service Cross on January 15, 1945. Technical Sergeant Reynolds, who had mocked Thompson's inventions, pinned the medal on personally and apologized for doubting him. The Army offered Thompson a position at Aberdeen Proving Ground. He declined, requesting to remain with Company B. He survived the war, receiving 2 Purple Hearts and a battlefield commission to 2nd lieutenant. After the war, Thompson returned to Iowa and resumed farming. He never spoke publicly about his grenades, honoring the Army's request to keep details classified. Private McCarthy was killed on January 8th near St. Posthumously awarded the Silver Star. Sergeant Henderson became a Chicago police officer and remained in contact with Thompson for decades. Thompson's innovations influenced post-war infantry tactics and development of specialized assault weapons. The Israeli Defense Forces incorporated similar principles in the 1950s. Soviet forces in Afghanistan developed thermoric grenades using blast over pressure in confined spaces. Echoing Thompson's discoveries, modern grenades reflect design philosophies influenced by World War II innovations, including Thompson's work. The German perspective revealed significant concern. A captured report from 1st SS Panzer Division noted American forces employing enhanced explosive devices, producing casualties and structural damage exceeding standard munitions. German intelligence interrogated prisoners about new grenade types, but received no information, leading analysts to conclude they were standard issue items. This mistake prevented development of countermeasures. German soldiers who survived described them as super bombs. The psychological impact was severe. Combined with Allied material superiority, the perception that Americans possessed invincible weapons eroded fighting spirit. Some units began surrendering rather than face assault by forces with these devastating devices. Thompson's technical understanding was sophisticated. The layered casing created a shaped charge effect, focusing blast energy. The increased explosive mass produced fatal blast over pressure without requiring fragmentation hits. The adjustable fuse allowed tactical adaptation. The weight while limiting range improved accuracy and penetration. Army regulations clearly prohibited unauthorized explosives, but battlefield necessity superseded peacetime rules. A 1947 judge-advocate opinion held that soldiers couldn't be punished for innovations that saved lives and accomplished missions, even if violating technical regulations. The 31 confirmed kills in one night represented remarkable efficiency. Standard assaults typically required 3 to 5 attackers per defender killed. Thompson's 4-man team achieved a 31-0 ratio without casualties. The human cost deserves consideration. 31 German soldiers, mostly conscripts, died that night. Thompson reportedly struggled with this. "War makes killers of farmers," he later said. "I'm proud I helped my men survive. I'm haunted by the men I killed." Company B survivors credited Thompson with their survival. Annual reunions from 1948 through the early 2000s invariably recognized his contributions. Reynolds, who initially mocked Thompson, became perhaps his strongest advocate. In a 1953 letter to the infantry school, Reynolds argued for incorporating battlefield innovation training into curriculum. Thompson's innovations fit the pattern of American military success in World War II. The United States won through flexibility, innovation, and willingness to challenge conventional thinking. From improvised hedgerow cutters to innovative tactics, American forces repeatedly demonstrated adaptability that German forces, bound by rigid doctrine, couldn't match. The declassification of Project Hammer documents in 1993 revealed the extent of official interest. Over 40 engineers studied the devices between January and June 1945. The final report concluded that while Thompson's specific designs were unsuitable for mass production, the principles should inform future development. Some recommendations were implemented in post-war weapons like the M34 and M26 grenades. Modern grenade design demonstrates the lasting impact of battlefield innovations. Today's grenades are more powerful, reliable, and versatile. But the fundamental principles maximize effect within practical constraints, adapt to tactical requirements, prioritize combat reliability, were established by soldiers like Thompson. The legend grew in decades after the war. Embellished versions circulated, some claiming over 50 kills or grenades that destroyed tanks. The truth, 31 confirmed kills from improvised explosives in one night, was remarkable enough. Thompson consistently redirected credit to his team. "The grenade worked because we all worked together," he said. "One man with a weapon is just a target. A team with a plan can accomplish anything." Modern historians studying Bonnet focus on the small unit tactics employed. The combination of stealth, concentrated firepower, exploitation of confusion, and coordinated withdrawal represents textbook special operations methodology. That a regular infantry team developed these tactics without formal training demonstrates the capability of well-led soldiers given appropriate weapons and freedom to adapt. The lessons extend beyond military applications. Innovation often comes from unexpected sources. Soldiers with practical experience may develop better solutions than professional engineers. Rigid regulations can prevent effective responses. Organizations that empower frontline personnel gain significant advantages. These principles remain relevant today. Businesses encouraging employee innovation outperform rigid hierarchies. Organizations allowing local adaptation succeed where inflexible systems fail. Thompson's 1944 principles apply in any situation requiring creative problem solving under pressure. Thompson's story is about more than grenades. It's about soldiers finding ways to survive despite inadequate equipment. It's about taking initiative when standard approaches fail. It's about courage to try something new. It's about ordinary people. A farm boy from Iowa and his team accomplishing extraordinary things. The night of December 22, 1944, demonstrated that mockery can turn to respect, that homemade can be as effective as factory-produced, and that 31 enemy soldiers could be eliminated by 4 Americans with improvised weapons, courage, and determination. Company B survived because Corporal Thompson ignored the laughter and built his grenades. Anyway, the men who made it home from Bonn never forgot that lesson. Neither should we. Corporal James Earl Thompson died on February 14, 1996, at age 73 on his Iowa farm. He was buried with full military honors. His Distinguished Service Cross was displayed at the funeral along with photographs of Company B. The eulogy delivered by one of his sons included a quote from Henderson's 1964 letter. "Every man who made it out of there owes you his life." Among the mourners were 7 veterans of Company B, all of whom had been at Bonds. They presented Thompson's widow with a plaque inscribed with 31 names. German soldiers killed December 22, 1944. "We never forget those who fell," the inscription read, "or the man who brought us home." Thompson's grenades, dismissed as the dumbest damn thing anyone had ever seen, had accomplished what standard weapons and tactics could not. They had cracked open a German defensive line, saved an American company from destruction, and demonstrated that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones nobody expects. The laughter stopped that December night in the frozen forests of Belgium. It was replaced by the thunder of improvised explosives, the collapse of enemy fortifications, and the quiet respect of men who understood they had witnessed something remarkable. A farm boy from Iowa, armed with salvaged materials and desperate ingenuity, had rewritten the rules of infantry combat. They mocked his homemade grenades. Then those grenades took out 31 Germans in a single night.